Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin daf Pechet. Perm Sameach to those who it's perm for you today. Today's daf is sponsored by Amy Goldstein, a loving memory for grandmother Anne Barnett on her yahrzeit. Her strength kept us going, and she maintained her dedication to seeking knowledge all the days of her life. Okay, we're going to get started with the bottom of Pei Zayin Amud. We're trying to figure out, still from continuation from yesterday's daf, how we can explain this braita of all the cases of a zakei mamre according to Rabbi Meir, who says that in order to be a zakei mamre, it has to be something where you have a chiyuv karet. Mishkaga, it would be chatat, korban chatat. The main thing we would need to find in all these cases, based on the pasuk, bein dam ladam, bein dim ladim, bein nega lenega, etc. We have a drasha on all those parts of the pasuk, how all these connect with a karet situation. So we're up to Nig'ei B'gadim, bottom of Pei Zayin Amud. Bipluta de Rabbi Yonatan ben Avtumus v'Rabbanan. D'Tanya, Rabbi Yonatan ben Avtumus Omer, Minayin lepricha b'bgadim shehi teora. How do you know that if you have a pricha b'gadim, you have leprosy on clothing, and it fills the entire beged, that it's going to be pure, that it's not considered leprous? נאמרה קרח בגבך באדם, ונאמרה קרח בגבך בבגדים. מה להלן פרח בכולו טהור, אף כאן פרח בכולו טהור. The pasuk in the Torah explains that when you have a nega on your body, it has to be a leprous mark, but not if it covers the entire body. If it covers your entire body, it's not leprous. And because the same words appear, karachat and gabacha by Adam, and the same words appear in the clothing, you learn from there what's true for one is true for the other. And therefore, if there's a leprous mark on and covers your entire piece of clothing, it is not leprous. And that disagrees with the rabbis who think that it is. So now, how do we get to karet from here? So Rashi explains that if it got on the whole beged and they brought it into the mikdash, or someone touched it and then went into the mikdash, which would render them impure, again, according to the rabbis, you would be chayav, you would be liable. According to Rabbi Yonatan, you'd be exempt. So if the zakei mamre held like Rabbi Yonatan and exempted you and said the beged is not impure, the beged is not impure, the beged is pure, and then you went into the temple, you would actually, or you brought it into the temple, or after touching it, you went into the temple, you'd actually be liable karet based on what the zakei mamre said. Next case, divrei. Okay, again, this is the pasuk, right? Ki palei davar mimcha davar lemishpat ben dam ledam ben din ledim ben nega lenega divrei rivot b'sha'arecha. So now we're on divrei. Elu ha'arachim v'charamim b'ekdeshot, because those are divrei. Those are things you recite, you say, and something becomes sanctified. So erchin, cherem, and hekdesh. Let's go through each one. Ha'erchin, this is when you say, I'm giving the value of a certain person to the temple. Bipluta de Rabbi Meir v'Rabbanan. This is, again, we'd have an issue with the zakei mamre where he sided on one side of this machloket, and would come to an issue related to karet. Ditna, hamarich pachot mi ben chodesh. Now, there is no erech in the Torah. If you say the value of this person is pami, using the word erech, there's a certain amount in the Torah for each age bracket, but not under a month. So the question is, what did you do? Were you giving just the value of this? There's demei, which is you're giving the value of something. And there's erech, the value would go by the value of the person in the marketplace. The erech would be the erech determined by the Torah. So if you use the language of erech for something there is no erech in, Rabbi Meir noten damat. Rabbi Meir says you must have meant dame. There's this concept, people don't say things in vain. So there must be they meant something. So if they didn't mean erech, they meant demei, the value of the item. The chachamim omrim lo amar klum, and the rabbis say, no, you didn't mean anything by what you said. Rashi explains two possible ramifications here. So if the rabbis say lo amar klum, which means it's not sanctified. So Rashi explains if the gizbar came, if the treasurer came and seized it anyway. So according to the rabbis, this isn't hekdesh. According to Rabbi Meir, it is. So therefore, if Rabbi Meir says it's hekdesh and the woman is betrothed, then her betrothal is not valid. Okay, but according to the rabbis, the woman would be betrothed. So now we have a problem because you could get to Isur Karet with Arayot, with a married woman, because all Isurei Karet, all Isurei Arayot, it says, elu, anyone who does any of these things, besides getting Mitabetin, there's also Karet associated with it. So there you would have an issue where this woman, there's a question, is she betrothed or is she not betrothed? And that could lead to an Isur Karet, basically, where if you hold like one opinion, you'll say she's not betrothed and she's not a married woman. But according to the other, she is betrothed and she is a married woman. Okay, that's one nafkamina. The other nafkamina, Rashi says, is that it's hekdesh. In other words, if it's really supposed to be go to the temple, then it is hekdesh. So according to Rabbi Meir, it would be hekdesh. According to the rabbis, it's not hekdesh. Now, what's the problem? Well, if it's hekdesh and you um and you then use it, right, for something else, then you have to bring an asham mi'ilod, and that asham is now kodesh. And if you deal with it with impurity, again, you'll be chayav karet. So we can get to it either because by saying, is it hekdesh, is it not hekdesh, right? And if it's not hekdesh, and there's no issue of tuma relating to it at all, okay, you brought something you're not supposed to bring into the asarat because you're bringing a sacrifice you're not supposed to have brought, but there's no issue of karet, but there's an issue of karet if you're going to deal with it when you're tamei. Okay, next. Charamim, beplukted Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera v'Rabbanan, ditnan. Okay, this issue of arayot and is it hekdesh and asham ilot, these two nafkaminas are going to be relevant for most of the upcoming cases. So now we have charamim. So now we have this machlok, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and Rabbanan, ditnan. The Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera omer, stam charamim lebed kabayet shene'emar kol cherem kodesh kodeshim ula Hashem. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says if someone says something is cherem, it means it goes to God, meaning it belongs to the temple, meaning it's sanctified. Kol cherem kodesh kodeshim ula Hashem. That sounds like any cherem is sanctified to God. Chachamim obrim stam charamim lekohen. No, cherem is something that goes to the kohen. Now, if it goes to the kohen, it becomes the kohen's to use, which again means, number one, there's no me'ilah because the kohen can use it. Someone can benefit, and also you can then betroth the woman with it. So again, if you hold like the other opinion, then you're going to say, oh, you can't betroth the woman, and then if someone did betroth the woman, she's not a married woman, and then someone could have relations with her and be over on Isur Karet because maybe she really is a married woman because maybe it really belonged to the Kohen and the Kohen was allowed to betroth her. Okay, again, and there's also the nafkamina for the Ashamilo. Shene'emar. Now, how does he get that Stam Charamim go to the Kohen? And what's he going to do with that pasuk? Kodesh Kodeshim ula Hashem. Shene'emar k'stei cherem laKohen tiachuzato. Here it says it'll be like a stei cherem that it goes to the Kohen. So there it seems like cherem goes to the Kohen. Im ke'emata malom or Kodesh Kodeshim ula Hashem. So why does it say Kodesh Kodeshim ula Hashem? Well, shachal al kodesh kodshim ve'al kodshim kalim. It means that if you take something that's Kodesh Kodesh or Kodshim Kalim, which theoretically the Kodesh Kodshim belongs to God. The Kodesh Kalim doesn't. But let's say you say this is Cherem. Now you might say, what do you mean? You can't say it's Cherem, it's already sanctified. No, if you say it's Cherem, it is sanctified. Now it's already sanctified, but what it means is that you'll have to bring whatever the value of that item is, you'll have to give that amount of money to Cherem, which according to this opinion means goes to the Kohen. And that's what it means about Kol Cherem Kodesh Kodeshim, means Cherem applies to Kodesh Kodeshim. So that's another machloket, which again has ramifications. If you hold by one side or the other, could have ramifications that lead to an Isur Karet. Hekdesho, bepluted Rabb Elazar ben Yaakov Rabbanan. So Hekdesh, we get into another machloket between Rabb Elazar and the ben Yaakov and the rabbis. Ditanya, Rabb Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, afilut sinora shel Hekdesh, even a very small fork of Hekdesh, stricha asara b'nei adam liftotam. You can only redeem it with 10 people. And the other opinion says all you need is 3. So now again, if you redeem an item with 3 people and someone else holds it's only by 10 people, then the item still has sanctification to it, which again has ramifications. What if someone betroths a woman, right? Is it betrothal valid? Is it not valid, right? If you hold 10, right, then you're going to say basically, oh, that wasn't a valid pidyon and it's still hekdesh. If you say 3, then you'll say, oh, it was a valid pidyon. It's no longer sanctified. If the person betrothed the woman, she actually is betrothed. So again, has ramifications for betrothal. It also has ramifications. Is this item still sanctified or not? Which again relates to me'ilah. Now the next word in the pasuk, rivot. Tivrei rivot b'sharech. So rivot zeh hashka'at sotah v'arifat eglah v'tarat mitzorah. So rivot relates to the following 3 things: the sota, the eglah rufa, and the purification process of a leper. So let's see what these machlokot are. Hashka'at sotah beplutet Rabb Elazar v'Rabbi Yeshua ditnan hamekane leishto. Somebody says to his wife, right, I'm concerned you've been talking to this man and you're not allowed to go into a room alone with this man. And if you do, right, he can basically bring her to drink the sota waters. So if he's mekane b'ishto, Rabb Elazar omer, mekane al pi shnayim umashke al pi ed echad o al pi atzmo. So he has to do the kinoi, the warning, with 2 witnesses. But when it comes to drinking, to make her drink the sota waters, if she goes into that room and he has only 1 witness, or only even if he's the witness that sees her go into the room, he can already make her drink the sota waters. Rabbi Yoshua omer mekane al pi shnayim umashke al pi shnayim. Rabbi Yeshua says both processes need two witnesses. So now we're going to have ramifications like this. What if she sells her ketubah money? Now, if she becomes a sota, has to drink the sota waters, even if she's not yet proven to be guilty, she loses her ketubah because she went into this room with the man she wasn't supposed to. Now, if she loses her ketubah money, then the ketubah money is not hers. Let's say she sells her rights to her ketubah money. And then the man who she sold it to seizes the money from the husband. And now we have this distinction between one witness and two. If she was mekaneh by one witness, only one saw her go into the room. And if we hold that's not really a sota, she needs two, then the ketubah money is hers. If we hold that she is a sota, then the ketubah money is not hers, which means the ketubah money is not his. Now, again, if he betroths a woman with money that's not his, the betrothal is not valid. So now we're going to have a problem with karet because perhaps, right, he thinks he betrothed the right. Maybe one holds the betrothal is not valid because the money wasn't his; it was stolen money, and then she's not a married woman. She goes sleep with another man, but according to the other opinion, she's not allowed to sleep with another man, and it's karet. So again, because of this disagreement, you could get to a karet issue. Arifate glabe plugte Rabb Elazar for Rabbi Akiva. This is going to be an interesting one because we're going to talk about betrothing a woman with the actual egla arufa. Okay, seems like an unpleasant ceremony under the chuppah. You're mekudeshet with this egla arufa. Okay, but let's see what we're getting to here. So Rabb Elazar and Rabbi Akiva disagreed. From where do we measure? Rabb Elazar Omer, now there's what happens. There's a dead body between two cities, and we have to find to which is the closest city. And then we say, depending on which is the closest city, they have to bring an egla rufa. Let's say we measure wrong because there's three different opinions about how to measure. So if we measure wrong and they did this egla rufa and the Zakei Mamre told them the wrong way to measure, then what happens? Then the egla rufa is actually not an egla rufa, which means it's actually permitted to benefit from, and then the kiddushin is valid. But if we hold by the other opinion, the kiddushin actually isn't valid. So again, we'd have to have, the truth is there would be a case where the rabbis would hold that it was done. The rabbis would say that the egla arufa, let me just get it right. We need to have the rabbis saying that she's actually a betrothed woman because the egla arufa, it wasn't really done validly. And the Zakei Mamre rules this was actually done correctly. And if the Zakei Mamre says it was done correctly and the rabbis all rule against him and say it wasn't done correctly, then the egla arufa is not prohibited to benefit from in reality, which means the woman's actually betrothed, which means the Zakei Mamre says she's not betrothed, so if she sleeps with another man, there's no problem. That would get us to an Isur karet, where really it is Isur karet because she really is married. So again, let's just read it inside now. Let's see the different opinions. Where do they measure from? Right, there's different parts of the body you can measure from, and you might end up getting to the wrong city based on this measurement. So Rabb Elazar says mitiburo from the navel, Rabbi Akiva omer michotmo from the nostrils or the nose. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov omer mimakom shenasa halal, which is mitzavaro, from where the person died, which is the neck. Okay, so we have three different opinions, and again, that will affect whether or not we measure, right? From where we measure, it might be closer to one city than the other. And again, if that city does the egla rufa, and then we think, oh, that wasn't right, and then they go betroth the woman, but it really was right, or the opposite, we could get to an issue where basically the woman is going to end up getting betrothed with this egla rufa, which is actually going to be, yes, valid, but the Zakei Mamre is going to claim, oh no, that was the wrong way to measure, and then she's actually going to be a married woman, and if she sleeps with someone else, karet. Taharat mitzorah beplutet Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan ditnan. So how does the mitzorah become pure? Ein lo bo en yad bo en regel ozen yamanit ein lo tara olamit. Remember, we're supposed to put the way the mitzorah process. You put the blood on the right finger, the right toe, and the right ear. Now, what if the person doesn't have? Then there's no way to become pure. Rabbi Elazar omer noten lo amakom v'yotzei. You put it where the stump where it should have been, and then the mitzorah can become pure. And once the mitzorah can become pure, the mitzorah can come into the temple. You're going to see where we now have a problem that could lead to karet, because if, let's say, the Zakei Mamre said the person could go in, and really they couldn't because ein lo tara olamit, right? They can't do it in that way. Then you're going to have an issue that they came into the temple when they were impure. They ate sacrificial meat when they were really impure. And we have a third opinion here, Rabbi Shimon omer noten al shel smol v'yotzei. You could put it on the left one instead of the right. So again, depending on the disagreement, you could say, the Zakei Mamre could say one way works and it really doesn't work, and then we're going to have a karet issue. Bisha'arecha, okay, the next word, bisha'arecha. What happens in your gates? This is a disagreement about leket shecha and peah. So leket, what's leket? Yitznan, this is when you drop bundles when you're in the fields, and then you have to leave. How many do you have to leave? So if you drop two, you have one or two, you have to leave it for the poor. Three already, you can pick it up. But we're going to see there's a disagreement Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel about this. Shnei shibolim leket, shlosha ena leket. That's what I just described. And the same thing with shichecha. When it comes to forgetting ones in the field, again, shnei omarim shicha, one or two, you have to leave it for the poor. Shlosha enam shicha, but three already is not considered shicha. Val kulam, Beit Shammai omrim, but Beit Shammai disagrees and says on all these things, shalosh la'ani va'arba lebal habayit. If it's three, it goes to the poor still. And it's one, two, or three gets left for the poor. Four goes to the bal habayit. Okay, so now where's the problem come in? So now we have a problem because if you say, the Rashi says a little complicated, but we're going to go with Rashi here. If you said uba ani unitalan, let's say you say the Zakei Mamre said Beit Shammai, and basically the Zakei Mamre said three goes to the ani, and then the ani came and took it, and then the Bal Habayit took it back and said, no, it's mine. Unitalan himenu. The Zakei Mamre have a gezel. So again, the Zakei Mamre is going to say this is theft. Ve'emakachim bo ishain. You can't betroth the woman with it. So if the Bal Habayit took it back from the poor person, according to the Zakei Mamre, it's not his, and he can't betroth the woman. But according to the Tanakama, right, those who disagree with Beit Shammai, it actually is his. It was his to begin with. So if he takes it back, it's actually his, and she's actually betrothed, again, getting to a karet issue. Pe'ah, bepluta de Rabbi Yishmael v'Rabbanan, t'nan, mitzvah pe'ah la'afrish min hakama. Okay, so the rabbis say the mitzvah of pe'ah is to be mafrish from, leave it in the field when it's growing. Lo afrish min hakama, afrish min ha'omarim. What if you cut everything in the field and you didn't leave for the poor? So then you leave from the bundles. Lo afrish min ha'omarim. If you didn't leave it from the bundles, yafrish min hakri ad shalom mercho. You can take it from the pile until you flatten out the pile. Once you flatten out the pile, mercho ma'aser v'noten lo. You have to take the ma'aser from all the stuff, and then you have to give pe'ah to the poor. But after that stage, once you turn it, now it doesn't say this, but this is implied. Once you turn it into kemach, to flour, you've already changed its form and you've acquired it, and you no longer have to give it to the poor people. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael amru af mafrish min ha'isa. But according to Rabbi Yishmael, they say even if you were mafrish from the isa after you turned it into flour and you made a batter, you still have to give it to the poor. So again, now we have a case where if the poor took it, right? So if we hold like Rabbi Yishmael, okay, it's not going to be gezel if the poor person comes and takes it. Let's say the poor person comes and takes it and then betroths a woman with it. So according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's theirs, and then they can betroth a woman with it. Le Rabbanan, according to the rabbis, it's theft. And then if it's theft and you betrothed a woman with it, again, right, the betrothal is not going to be valid, right? So again, depending on which way you go, whether the betrothal is valid or not, which again has ramifications for karet. Okay, so that we finished the braita explaining all the different details of how you could get to the cases, and we could get to an isur karet in every situation. Now we go back to the Mishnah. Shlosha batei dinim. So the Mishnah had said there's three courts. Okay, so let's just go back for a quick minute to the Mishnah on Pevav Amud Bet. Shlosha batei dinim. Sorry, let me just find right. אחד יושב על פתח הר הבית, אחד יושב על פתח הזרע, אחד יושב בלשכת הגזית. באים לזה שעל פתח הר הבית ואומר, כך דרשתי וכך דרשו חבריי, כך לימדתי וכך לימדו חבריי. Okay, and then we go through the rest of the Mishnah. We're going to now have Rav Kahana, who's going to explain what exactly, we're going to have a machloket here. What type of disagreement do we need to have between the Zakei Mamre and the rabbis in terms of who's holding what? Again, we're going to see what exactly we mean by this. But there's going to be Zakei Mamre and what is not going to be Zakei Mamre. So Rav Kahane is more limiting of the Zakei Mamre law. And he says, Hu omer mipi hashmua v'hem omer mipi hashmua eno neherag. If the Zakei Mamre says, listen, this is the tradition I got from my rabbis, and the Dayanim say, this is the tradition we got from our rabbis, then he doesn't get killed. Hu omer kachu be'enai v'hem omer kachu be'enenu. As long as they're in equal status. If he says, this is what seems logical to me, and they say, this is what seems logical to us, eno neherag. Also not. And all the more so because obviously tradition of rabbis is stronger than logic. So if he claims this is what I learned by tradition from my rabbis, and they say this is what seems logical to us, of course he's not a Zakei Mamre. Now we're going to get to all, right? We're finally done with all the permutations. We're on the last one. only case he gets killed is ad shiomar kachu be'enai v'hem omeim pi hashmua. He says, this is how it looks to me logically, and they say we have a tradition. If he goes against them by his logic against their tradition, then he's a zakei mamre, because again, what's the real issue here according to this? He's got an authority issue. Not only is he going against the court, but he's going against the court saying my logic is better than your tradition. Okay, it has to be like a very severe insult to the court, which is like that. And how do they prove it? Okay, we're gonna talk about him. Rashi says he argued with the Chachamim and Lishkat Gazid on 4 things. It talks about him Masechet Eduyot, and he said to his son at his death, he said, "Listen, I want you to change your mind about this." And I couldn't change my mind, but you can. I couldn't because I learned it from my rabbis. You could. So there it seems like it was only because he learned it from his rabbis that he wasn't killed because he had a tradition. It wasn't logic. And that's why he says to his son, you can change your mind because you didn't learn it from your rabbis like that. You don't have this tradition like I did. Of course, he had his father's tradition, but his point is you can go on it. I couldn't change my mind. And that's why Akavia didn't get killed. But now we have a different opinion, and according to that, we're going to have to explain why didn't Akavia ben Mahalalel get killed if he really went against the rabbis in Lishkat Kasi. Rabbi Elazar Omer, afilu hu omer mipi hashmua, v'hem omrim kachu be'einenu neherag. Even if he says mipi hashmua, and they say this seems logical to us, even when the Zakei Mamre comes with a tradition, the most extreme case, neherag, even in that case, he's killed. Why? Kedei shelo yirbu machlokot b'Yisrael. The main reason why we have the din of Zakei Mamre, according to Rabbi Elazar, we just don't want machlokot, which is fascinating. We have machlokot tons of times, but we don't want anyone going against the authority of the Beit Din on anything, even if they have a stronger claim, because it's just not good for the Jewish people to have differences of opinion like this. You want to know why he wasn't killed? Well, because he didn't do what we saw in the Mishna. You have to then go teach according to that. He disagreed with them, but he didn't go teaching after they disagreed. Said, we don't agree with you. He didn't go and teach according to his way of thinking. That's why he didn't get killed. Okay, again, there's all conjecture about why he didn't get killed, and each one assumes it supports their own opinion. So now we're going to have a difficulty on Rabbi Elazar. Tnan kafta Rashi v'kafta shu chaverai kaf limadi v'kaf limdu chaverai. My lavdu amar mipi hashmua v'hem umim kachu be'einenu. Sorry, this is did I say that right? It's a difficulty on, 1 second. Okay, right, yafeh. So now, it seems like, it seems like even if he says mipi hashmua, right, I have a tradition, and they said kachu be'einenu, which sounds like, specifically this supports Rabb Elazar, that's kadesha l'rubu machlokot, because it sounds like this could be any possibility. So I said it wrong before. This is against the other, Rav Kahana, because this sounds like kaf darashti, kaf darshu, kaf limanti, kaf limdu. It could be any of the possibilities. So now they say, no, you could explain that when it says kaf darashti, he's saying, oh, this is what I think. And with kaf darshu chaverai, and this is what they said against me because they have a tradition. In other words, you could explain it to fit with Rav Kahana, so it doesn't prove anything. Next, Tashma, the Amar Rabbi Yoshiash, L'shad Dvarim Sachli Ze'eri Ma'anshe Yerushalayim. So now we're going to quote Rabbi Yoshai, who quotes Ze'eri, and I'm going to see what he says about this. And this is also, we're going to see which opinion this seems to go better with. So he says, Ze'eri told me that he learned from the Anshe Yerushalayim 3 things. Baal shemachalo kinuyo kinuyo machul. The husband decides, I warned my wife not to go into a room alone, but you know what? I don't want to bring her to drink the soda waters, even though she did. He can do that. He can say, I give up my rights to do this. It's okay. I don't want it. I forgive her. Next, the second thing, turning now to Amud Bet. Ben Sorel Moresh Ratzu Avivi Molim Cholo Mochalin. If you have a Ben Sorel Moresh, that his parents decided not to bring him in, again, after they gave him Malkot, and then he did it again, and he ate the meat and drank the wine and stole, they can say we don't want to. And Zakei Mamre Sharatzu Beitin Limcholo Mochalin Lo. And a Zakei Mamre that the Beitin wanted to say it's okay, we'll let it go, they can do it. But he continues to say that Kishabah Rabbi Yoshia, Kishabati Yetzach Chaverai Shabitarom, Ashnayim Hoduli, Al Zakei Mamre Lo Hoduli. Okay, but actually it was Ze'eri who was telling him this. Ze'eri said, listen, I learned this from Anshe Yerushalayim. When I got to my friends in the Darom, they said to me, we don't agree with you about the Zakei Mamre thing. We agree with you about the sota, and we agree about the Ben Sorah Mored. Those are personal issues. You can say, no, it's fine. I don't want to do that. But now when it comes to a communal thing and against the courts, why? Okay, this sounds very clear that in the end, what's the most important thing? We don't want disagreements. And this would sound like Rabb Elazar, who says that's the whole issue here. It doesn't matter which kind of way he's disagreeing with them, any kind of disagreement, someone who's going against what the court rules, that is a major problem, which is the whole essence of Zakei Mamre, according to Rabbi Elazar, and Tiyuvta. This is, in fact, a Tiyuvta, a difficulty to Rav Kahana, which seems like this really becomes the main issue. We don't want, and this is all back to the understanding, we can't go against the court, because going against the court reduces, right? It means that people are going to start doubting the court. People are going to start saying, oh, the court, if people are saying we go against the court and we're going to teach like the court against the court, that's going to create a problem in the whole system. Okay, so we can't have that. Tanya, another braita. Amar Rabbi Yossi, mitchila lo hayu marbim machlokot b'Yisrael. Ela, okay, in the beginning, there weren't so many machlokot. Ela beitin shel shavim be'echad, how would we limit machlokot? Well, there was consensus. And where was the consensus? In the beitin shel shavim be'echad, yoshvim b'lishkat hagazit. Okay, so we had the main central court, which generally agreed on things. And we had shnei batei dinim shel 23. These are the ones mentioned in our Mishna. Echad yoshev al petach harabayit, echad yoshev al petach hazara, right? One by the entrance to harabayit, one by the entrance to the hazara. Ushar batei dinim shel 23, and all the other courts of 23, yoshvim b'chol ha'yarot Yisrael, right? They were around in every city. And the way it would work, if you had a question, utzrach hadavar lish'ol, first you would go sho'alim beit din shebi'an, you would go to the one in your city. Im shamu amar lahem, if they knew the halacha, they would tell them. Im la ba'in lezeh shesamuch liram, if they didn't have a court in their area, they would go to the closest court that was next to their city. Im shamu amru lahem, if they knew the law, they would tell them. Im lav, if not, where would they all send them? Ba'in lezeh shal petach harabayit. So you then go to the central court, but not the most central one. First, you would start in the one in harabayit. Im shamu amru lahem v'im lav. If they knew the halacha, they would tell them. If not, ba'im lezeh shal petach hazara. Then you would get closer and closer to the temple, right? You would go to the one outside the hazara. V'omer kach darashi kach doshu chaverai. By the way, this isn't just a halacha that you didn't know. This is when there's a zaken who says, I think the halacha is like this, and the dayanim disagree. So he would take it to the higher court. And then he would get there to the one that was by the Azara, and he would say, listen, this is how I learned, but this is what my friend said. Right? This is what I taught, and this is what they taught. Im shamu amru lahen, if they knew what was right, they would tell him. Im lav, if they didn't know, then elu ve'elu ba'in lishkat hagazit. Then they would bring it all into the lishkat hagazit, the one that was really inside the temple. Shesham yoshvim tamid shel shachar ad tamid shel ben harabayim. They would be standing there from morning till night, from the time they would sacrifice the morning sacrifice until the time they would bring the afternoon sacrifice. Ube Shabbatot Yamim Tovim Yoshvim B'chel. Okay, they would sit in the chel, which is this area outside the Azara, went around by the Harabayit, and that area they would move on Shabbat. Some people, there were two different reasons given. One reason is because they didn't want to look like they were judging on Shabbat. They couldn't judge on Shabbat, so they wouldn't sit in their regular spot. Some people say there were too many people there, so they have to move out. I think Rashi brings both of these possibilities. And then, Rashi brings both. Nish'ala she'ela b'fnehem. Okay, so now they go to the Lishkat HaGazit. We just got like a parenthetical explanation about who was sitting there and when they would sit there. Im shamu, so nish'ala she'ela b'fnehem. So then the question would be asked. Im shamu amru lahem v'im la b'umdim l'miyan. So if they all knew, great, they would answer. If not, they would take a vote, and they would go by their vote. Rabu ha'metamim timu, rabu ha'metarim tiaru. So if the majority said it's tameh, tameh. If the majority said tahor, tahor. And again, obviously, whatever kind of question it was. But that was all originally, when there weren't a lot of machlokot. But Mishe Rabu, Talmidei Shammai v'Hillel, Shelo Shimshu Kol Tzarkan, Rabu machlokot Yisrael v'Naseh Torah Kishtei Torah. Once the Talmidim of Shammai and Hillel didn't do their job properly to really pass down the tradition, already we have this problem. There's a lot of machlokot, and the Torah is like Shtei Torot. Now, what the ramifications of this is, it seems like there still is a din of Zakei Mamre, and the Rambam explains basically that what this means is there were a lot of machlokot. We still go by majority, okay? But it was just more, like a lot more lack of clarity, okay? Because there were just already a lot of machlokot. I just want to check one thing because I want to remember exactly what the Rambam says here in the Perush Mishna. He says that, right, that based on this, we now say, since there's a lot of different opinions and we don't know what's really true, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, which we know from other sugyot. Okay, they're both the living Torah, and we have to listen anyway. And this is based on the pasuk that comes up in the Zakei Mamre context, which is Ela shafet asher yeh bayamim hahem. we have to go with the judge that's in our day, even if they have lesser authority or they're less closer to the truth. Okay, we still have to go by the court. Okay, so even though it sounds like maybe at this point there's already riboy machlokot, so maybe there's no zakei mamre, the Rambam says that's not what this is trying to say. Okay, now we continue. The braita now continues to say, how did they choose judges? So misham kotvim v'sholchim b'chol makomot. So from the lishkat hagazit, they would send out like applications, you could say. Okay, kol mishu chacham ushval berech. Anyone who's smart and like low knee, which means like they're humble. V'dat habriyot nochem, and when people like them, they're liked by many people. Yehei dayan be'iro. He can be a dayan in his city. Misham alino tol harabayit, misham lazara, misham lishkat hagazit. And then we have a system where people rise up. When you rise up, somebody dies, you take their place, and from there you can rise up and get first to the harabayit, then to the azara, then to lishkat hagazit. Shalchumitam. They asked a question from Israel. So that's the end of the braita. And now we hear some other things related. Ezehu ben olam haba, who's going to get to the world to come. Ambatnan ushval berech, exactly what we're talking about. Someone who's humble and shval berech, right, low in knees. Which again, just means he holds himself low, not high and haughty. Shayif ba'ayil, shayif b'nafik. He leans over when he comes in. He leans over when he gets out, meaning he's not arrogant and haughty. V'garis ba'oraita tadiri. He learns Torah all the time. V'lo machzik tibuta l'nafshe, and doesn't think so highly of himself. Yahavu be'Rabbanan einehon. Who did they put their eyes on? Who is like this? The ideal. You ready for this? B'Rav Ula bar Abba. Okay, someone who is very not known by the Gemara, an unknown name, and which is kind of funny. It's almost like it's a joke. Like we don't know anyone who's like that. He's the only one, and we don't even really know so much about him, as opposed to all the other rabbis, who you would expect them to say, but maybe they didn't all have all these qualities. I don't know. It leaves open a bit of a question here why they chose him, a really unknown character. Back to the Mishnah. Chazar li rov shana. He goes back to his city, and then he teaches that way. So now we're going to have another machloket in a braita. Tanu Rabbanan. Eno chayav ad she'aseh kol hora'ato o yoreh la'acherim v'yasu kol hora'ato. There's two options of what he could do wrong. Either he himself could do according to what he said, or he could teach others and they'll do wrong what he said. Okay, so we need him to teach. We need people to then go with him, basically breaking the halacha and going against what the rabbis said. So either himself or other people. So bishlama yoreh la'acherim v'yasu kol hora'ato. We get it. He teaches others, and then they practice his opinion. Mikar la barkatalahu, because then he wasn't liable the death penalty before because he didn't do anything. And hashta barkatalahu, but once he teaches it to them and then they do it, then he becomes liable the death penalty because of a zakei mamre. Ella, you'll see this part's easy, but now they're going to say, well, what doesn't make sense? Ella sheyaseh kol hora'ato, but if he does according to his own teaching, well, why should he get killed as a zakei mamre? He should get killed because, especially if we go with Rabbi Meir, he did something that was liable, or if we say it was mitat beitin, he's liable for mitat beitin because of his action, not because of zakei mamre, but because of what he did. So, and if he did it before, let's say, then he would already be liable the death penalty before it. So it's not like all of a sudden now he's liable the death penalty for zakei mamre. He was already liable the death penalty for doing this before. So hatina checho de'ore b'chelev v'dam. Well, let's say he taught incorrectly about chelev v'dam and he did it wrong, and he said this isn't chelev and he ate it. Well, then demikar la barkatalahu. Now chelev and dam, if you eat it, you're only liable lashes. So he wasn't liable the death penalty yet, and therefore hashta. Now that he did it as a zakei mamre, it now changes everything because now barkatalahu. Now he's liable the death penalty. Elahecha de'ore b'chai v'mito beitin. But if it was something that had to do with mitat beitin, and he did it already before, and now he does it as a zakei mamre, mikar nami barkat lahu, right? From the beginning, it was already barkat. So how do you explain this? So they say, an was meikara by hatra'ah. If he was going to be liable for that earlier, he needed to have been warned in order to get the death penalty. But a zakei mamre doesn't need to get warned to be liable as a zakei mamre. So let's say he did it before, but he wasn't warned before, so he wouldn't get the death penalty. But now as a zakei mamre, he'll get the death penalty even without a warning. So hashta lo by hatra'ah. Now he doesn't need hatra'ah. So now they're going to go back to the Macy, because remember, a Macy doesn't need hatra'ah either. So let's say he ruled incorrectly about a Macy and claimed what he was doing wasn't really Macy, and it really was. So Macy de lo by hatra'ah ma'ika lamemer. How can you explain the Macy case? Because he didn't need to be warned before. And now if he did it before and now he continues to do it, now he's liable as a kamarmit, but he was already liable because he was a Macy. So meikara yamartama makablina mine. Beforehand, if he tried to explain why he thought he wasn't a Macy, we would at least accept his claims and at least deal with them. We might not agree with them in the end, but we would at least accept them. But but if he tries to explain now why he thinks that Macy, this isn't Macy, we won't accept it anymore because it was already proved in the high court of Lishkat Gazita. He was wrong about it. So we're not going to accept any claim. And that would be the difference between before and now. Okay, so we explained that side issue about how we could say he's eno chayav, even that he will be chayav, even if he does it, and not only if other people, even though theoretically there should be no switch in his status because of Zakimamri, he was already liable before, but we came up with a few cases where it would make sense. New Mishnah. Chomer b'divrei sofrim b'divrei Torah. Okay, there's a big chomer here of rabbinic law from Torah law. And this really also, according to at least some opinion here, is going to get down to the real issue of Zakei Mamre according to the perspective that's listed in this Mishnah. Again, not everybody holds this way. That's why we saw before the different opinions about what case is the Zakei Mamre case. But this, as we're going to see, goes with Rabbi Yehuda's approach. Ha'omer ein tefillin kedei lavor al divrei Torah patur. If you say there's no such thing as tefillin, and you teach people there is no law of tefillin, you're exempt from Zakei Mamre because divrei Torah people take pretty seriously. We're not worried that someone's going to believe you when you say that. But chamesh totafot lo sifal divrei sofrim chayav. But if you say there's 5 batim in the tefillin instead of 4, right? The 4 cloths that we put in and the 4 batim that we put in with the cloths. If you say that there's 5 instead of 4, then you're liable, okay? Because what you've done is, now we're going to see this in the Gemara, you're really chayav because you've taken something that was a Torah law, and if they had done 4, it would have been fine. Now that they do 5, it's bal tosif, right? You've added, and you've also ruined the mitzvah because you can't be yotzei with tefillin when there's 5 batim. So now, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yoshaya, Eno chayav ela al davar shikaro midivrei Torah uperusho midivrei sofrim. Now he's going to explain a little bit more. He's going to elaborate on this. So just like we said, right? It has to be davar shikaro midivrei Torah, where like tefillin, where there's a Torah law, the concept is from the Torah, but Perusho how to do it is midivrei sofrim. It doesn't say in the Torah 4 batim, right? 4 totafot. It's darshaned out from the Torah. So the explanation of it is from the rabbis. V'yesh bo lehosif, and you could technically add ve'im hosif gore'ah, and if you add, you ruin it. This is what I was saying before, where it's a mitzvah in and of itself the way it is, but if you add more, you're going to destroy the halacha, ruin it. Ve'en lanu ela tefillin alibi de Rabbi Yehuda. This is all, first of all, according to Rabbi Yehuda's explanation. He said, remember, you're a Zakei Mamre when it's ikar midivrei Torah, the perusho midivrei sofrim, and we spoke about it before, that it seems like he's adding to Rabbi Meir. He also agrees karet, but he's talking about within this framework of the perush midivrei sofrim, there's really only one case, according to Rabbi Yoshai, the way he understands Rabbi Yehuda here, which would be only in tefillin. So we still have all the karet cases if we assume that Rabbi Yehuda is adding to Rabbi Meir. But when it comes to the ones that are in this category, there's only one, and that's tefillin, because nothing else matches this criteria. Where, again, we have to explain, and I'll explain this well, because in the next section you'll have to get this right, which has to be that it's already, it's going to be good if you do it that way. If you add to it, you're going to ruin it, okay? Now, ha'ika lulav, what about lulav? Lulav, we mean the arba meaning, where it's also the same kind of thing. You add a 5th, you're bal tosif, so it sounds like the same kind of thing. Where, again, the description of it's in the Torah, but how exactly, which items we bring and how many are really determined by rabbinic law. Right? Sounds like all the same thing. You could add a 5th, and if you do, you ruin it. So what about that? So say, well, not really. What do you think? If you don't think they need to be bound together, then you have a chiyuv and a lulav, chiyuv and an etrog, chiyuv and hadassim. They're each independent chiyuvim, and therefore, when you add the 5th, you're not messing it up. You might be chayav and bal tosif, but you're liable just for that 5th one. The 4 you did are actually fine. You didn't ruin the mitzvah because they're not viewed as one unit. And if you think they need to be bound, and that's what we do, even though we actually don't paskin they have to be bound. But if you paskin they have to be bound, well, then you're only the mitzvah again. We need the mitzvah to be fine before, and then you've added one. But if you're binding them all together at once, then you're binding them with all 5 inside. And therefore, it was never good to begin with, okay? They're going to say, Garua ba'ometu. It's already messed up from the get-go, from as soon as you start. We need something that was good, then you added and ruined it. And that's not true with lulav. Ha'ika tzitzi. What about tzitzi? Tikaro midivrei Torah. Again, it says it in the Torah, but pirushon midivrei tzofrim. It's defined by the rabbis. V'yesh bolo sifim mosif gorea, because you're supposed to have 4 strings, which again, when you tie them, they become 8 because you loop them around, make a knot at the top, the kesher elyon, we'll talk about that, and then it comes out to 8 strings. Now again, here, according to the Torah, it never says that, but according to the rabbis, you have to add these 4 strings. And again, yesh bolo sifim mosif gorea. If you add 5, which make 10, you're going to be gorea. But tzitzit again, my spiralan, we're going to do the same kind of thing. Isfiralan de kesher elyon lav doraita. If you don't need the kesher elyon by Torah law, then then you don't need the kesher, and then each string is by itself. So once you have the 4 strings are fine. You've added a 5th, you've messed it up, but you've just messed it up by adding the 5th. The 4 are still fine in of themselves because they're not all viewed as a unit. The Israeli the kesher elyon doraita garova omid. And if you think it's the kesher is on by Torah law, then it's when you tie it, that's when it becomes messed up. That's when it becomes the mitzvah, and it's already messed up from the beginning. Again, it wasn't a mitzvah that was good to begin with, and then it got messed up. So that's where we're going to stop today. So it sounds like all we have is tefillin. Next, we're going to ask is, what about tefillin itself? Can't you say the same thing? Okay, and we'll get, like you said, for lulav and tzitzit, and we're going to get back to that and finish up the sugya, and then start with the next Mishna. So what did we have here today? We started with the continuation of the braita, trying to figure out all those cases in the braita, all the divrei rivot b'sharecha, how we get to cases that how does the braita fit with Rabbi Meir, that they can all be karet cases, and from all those cases we got to potential karet cases. Then we got to what cases the Zakei Mamre, is it any case where he disagrees, or is it only if he claims my logic overrides your tradition? Because then it's a real breach in the respect of the court. Or do we think any disagreement with the court is a breach of respect for the court? Okay, which seemed to be the way the Gemara wanted to go, that we don't want machlokot, and we really want to keep the power of the court in place and not have people start to doubt the power of the court. And then we got to how we choose the judges. We talked about that. We talked about the difference of, the courts when they went from court to court. We got to the other thing about the 2 ways you can become a Zakei Mamre, either by doing like what you taught or by teaching and having people do what you taught. And we tried to figure out weren't you doing things in the bad way already before and already liable to death penalty? So we had to kind of figure out ways to explain that, which we came up with a few ways. And then we got to this Mishna, which seemed to go like Rabbi Yehuda, about the case of Zakei Mamre as Kedei Lavor, right? Homer ain't feeling, sorry, the way we want to say it is, you'd have to say that I agree that there's tefillin, but I disagree about how many, and you say 5 totafot instead of 4. And then we tried to say, and the only case that in the Gemara, they said, it's really the only case where we have this, and we tried to say, why not tzitzit, why not lulav? From there, we finished for today, wishing everyone, again, Purim Sameach, Shabbat Shalom, and Shabbat Tov.